As the world now reopens, you're seeing a lot of nomad capitalists get back on the road. They're flying to check out their potential plan Bs. They're turning their plan Bs into plan As, and they are flying around the world to do that. Today, I'm going to give you a frequent flyers checklist so that you don't waste time and money. I've been flying since I'm 2 months old, and basically my entire adult life I've been flying, collecting miles, collecting status, and so I'm going to tell you where I think the game lies today that is different from what you're going to see on any of the points websites that want to sell you credit cards. And so because I have nothing to sell you, my approach is perhaps a little bit more dour. Here's what I said recently on social media. Earning airline miles, generally worthless. Most airport lounge is not worth it, and airline status is kind of sort of worth it depending on what you're doing. So I'm going to walk you through all this. If it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. And what does that mean? It means that you have your assets in a different place than where you live. It means that you pay less tax when you can, legally. It means that you have a second citizenship to be prepared. It means that you are a global citizen, a nomad capitalist as it were, who takes care to protect your family and your freedom and your finances. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. So because I'm seeing a lot of people now getting back on the road and they're telling me, well, I want to make sure I fly with this airline, or I want to make sure I get my points, right? One thing we've heard for many years is I'm leaving Australia. You're telling me I've got to cancel my credit cards for my particular tax plan. And what about my miles, right? People, oh, they love these miles. And so what I think is the credit card companies, the banks have done such a great job sucking people in to be doing, like, people must be spending money on stuff they don't want just to get these miles. And I think, speaking from past experience, people will fly out of their way, they'll do things that are inorganic just to get some miles, to get some status. So the first thing that I would tell you is you want to figure out if you're going to be traveling frequently, you want to have some kind of airline that you choose, because I do think that status has some value. We've seen that especially this summer. I've flown through Europe a couple times. I've flown different continents, and yeah, check-in lines are long. And so if you have, let's say, gold status on the Star Alliance, if you have like generally the second level of status on any line, so you've got Star Alliance, you've got SkyTeam, and you've got One World. If you can get to like that second level, you're going to get priority check-in. You're going to get priority baggage service, so it comes a little bit faster. They don't always do that, but you're going to get priority boarding, and so you can make sure you get your seat. You just avoid the hustle and bustle. And so I can tell you that has saved me a lot of time. So to do that, you want to choose your airline. Where is it you live? What's your home city? For example, if you live in Dallas in the United States, Dallas, Texas, you're going to think, oh, I've got to fly in American Airlines. However, if you're frequently going to Europe, why don't you fly on a European carrier that has service to Dallas, and then you can connect from there. So non-stops are often going to be more expensive because airlines that run a hub and spoke model, not only do they want to charge you more for the convenience, but they run a hub and spoke model. They don't want to sell a non-stop to someone and then prevent a connector to being able to buy that ticket. And so for that purpose, it may be beneficial to avoid non-stops and not go with the big airline in your home city. So where do you live? Where do you plan to live, right? And so look at where it is that you're going to be. So I have a number of hubs in Eastern Europe. And so Turkish Airlines is a great connector because not only do they fly to my hubs in Latin America and Asia, and where we do business in like Mexico City, but they connect very easily those places in Eastern Europe, so Tbilisi, Belgrade, etc. And they do so better than, let's say, Fly Dubai, which is part of Emirates, where you're kind of on it's kind of inconvenient. And so you look at where do you want to go, and what are the airlines there, and where can I perhaps avoid a nonstop if that's beneficial to be in a good alliance. I would avoid the SkyTeam alliance. I would focus on preferably the Star Alliance. I think One World is the second best, but you want to figure out like where you live. You also want to look at the hard and soft service on an airline. So for me, Turkish Airlines, for example, works out very well because the actual service, the hard service is, for example, if you want to fly business class, in Europe, business class generally doesn't exist. So you're just going to get a seat with an empty seat next to you, no more leg room. I've done business class on like miles redemptions where my knees are like jammed against the back of the seat. Turkish Airlines avoids that. They've got a better hard product. They've also, I think, got a better soft product than a lot of kind of European carriers where budget carriers have taken over, right? American Airlines, probably generally bad all around. Asian Airlines, probably substantially better, including the Middle East. So if you factor in where you're living now and where you would like to live or where you'd like to explore, you can kind of figure out, okay, Eastern Europe, great, Turkish, great base, that connects me to the US or connects me to Asia, connects me where I'm living. And then you can establish your alliance from there. Turkish Airlines part of the Star Alliance, and so then you have Lufthansa, you have United, you have Swiss, you have Austrian, you have Singaporean, you have Thai, you have all those other alliances. Probably the best in my experience, right? And so don't imagine that like status is going to solve all your problems. Most of the time, if you get status on like one airline, that's the only airline that you can actually really get all the full benefits on. So like going and flying on TAP Portugal Airlines and saying, look, I'm a Turkish, Gold member, like, why don't you give me a better seat? Like, they don't care. And I think that it's maybe oversold in that regard. A lot of people use Aegean Airlines or have historically used Aegean Airlines to use the Star Alliance because it's easier to get, especially if you ever take a few flights per year through Greece. If you just took one flight from Europe to a Greek island, you would take basically 4 flights and you would have an easier track towards getting gold status and then getting Star Alliance gold status. But miles redemptions are worse, and just a lot of the benefits don't necessarily trickle down. So if you just want the gold status, just for checking in and avoiding lines, then maybe something like Aegean works. For me, I'm switching over to Turkish Airlines because it's where basically it connects everywhere in the world that I go. I happen to have a home there, and I think the hard service is better. And actually the soft service at the Istanbul airport is better than it used to be. So figure out where you're living, choose an alliance, and try and base the flights around that. I don't go super out of my way to do that, but I happen to think the Star Alliance airlines actually are the best. Like, I recently flew in Qatar Airlines from Kuala Lumpur, which is part of Oneworld, just wasn't as into it. So you want to consider things like from Kuala Lumpur to Eastern Europe and Qatar, that also works, and potentially could be a little bit faster, but Qatar to Kuala Lumpur is 7 hours. You're not going to sleep on that flight the way you would on a flight from Kuala Lumpur to Istanbul, which is 11 hours. We can actually have a meal and then get a full night's sleep and then arrive well rested. So those are the things you want to consider. On the lounges, I think people are expect lounges to be better than they are. And so if you are getting a credit card because you want lounge access, especially if it's a priority pass, I wouldn't get too excited. I was in a lounge recently, business class lounge in Milan, Italy, and internet didn't work. And the woman's just like, why don't you just keep us trying it? What do you expect from the lounge? Like, it's just not like people think it's some magical place. Everything works perfectly. Like, yeah, it's not the first lounge I've been to. The internet just doesn't work, and I'm in like tethering my phone. The food often isn't that great. And the lines are really long. What you see like in the United States, for example, and also in Mexico City, where there's an American Express Centurion lounge, lines are just so long because these lounges aren't big enough. I've flown business class on Aeromexico. Sometimes I've gotten upgraded or I've bought an upgrade, and they're like, oh, we're not accepting people who got upgraded today. It's only a 1 hour maximum. And so there's just a lot of caveats being added to lounges. I think the Turkish lounge is good. I think Qatar's lounge is good. Okay, Emirates lounges are good, but I happen to think Emirates is overrated as an airline. In Latin America, forget it. Lounges are generally, it's just not a luxurious kind of part of the world, I don't think, for that kind of stuff. Asia's pretty good. So the lounges in Singapore, even some of the lesser quality lounges are pretty good. So like you could use a priority pass to get into an average lounge in Singapore, which is actually pretty good. But when you go to a lot of other lounges in the world, don't expect a lot. I was in a lounge in Kazakhstan once where they had cookies and they were for sale. That was it. That was the entire thing. It's like you might as well just sit by the gate. So I think that people, because of the devaluation of where anyone who's got a credit card can get this stuff, the lines are longer, the quality's less, the lounges just focus on, unless it's an airline lounge for business or first passengers, they just focus on getting their $29 or whatever it is and just putting out some old rigatoni. I don't really expect a lot. If you want a lot, you need to go through one of the high quality airlines that has a great hard product, like a Qatar, a Turkish, an Emirates. Lufthansa's all right, but I find the European carriers to be kind of rather, what you'd expect in Europe, where it's like, don't be too luxurious. Like it's more focused on efficiency and things working, and that's fine. But there's not really as much luxury in my opinion. But priority pass and that kind of stuff, I really wouldn't get too excited. I often will sometimes just say, as you see our airports having better and better restaurants, I'm just like, let's just go like a good restaurant and just spend $20 and just have a nice meal rather than fighting people in the lounge. And so especially in the pandemic, you saw like even the Turkish lounge would cut back. It's like, here's some fava beans on a tray. It's like, I think I'll go and get a burger. And so just a lot of limits and restrictions. So unless, again, you're in one of those top tier lounges, I wouldn't bother. Airline Miles, I think the US airlines actually are some of the best because they've done the least devaluation. Canada's done a bunch of devaluation. Asian airlines were always incredibly devalued. And so if you're earning airline miles to use them, number one, you want to book well in advance. So I've tried to burn off a pile of miles. I would have been glad to overpay for some flights recently. There's just no availability for flights if you're booking like less than a month, 2 months, 3 months in advance. And so like the other issue with miles is I did find some availability recently. I wanted to do a Kuala Lumpur to London. Ultimately didn't do it. The one flight I could find, I still have a bunch of American Airlines miles, was through Sri Lanka. And I'm like, I don't think what's going on. I want to fly in Sri Lankan Airways. That's the best way to make sure I get to London or don't get asked any questions. And so the flights are often inconvenient, right? Like you occasionally find availability with 20-hour layovers, or you'll find like 3 stops along the way. I generally don't find miles to be that great. Sometimes you get lucky, and somebody said, "Oh, look, I just booked 15,000 miles, and I'm booking from Turkey to Spain or something." I'm like, okay, like that sometimes happens, but you have to book in advance. The other challenge is sometimes that you'll see with all these like fuel surcharges and fees, you'll see like, oh, it's miles plus $200, and the flight's like $400. Like for what? It's basically a half off coupon, and they burned all these miles. Hey, I guess you'll take half off. By the way, you don't earn more miles when you're flying on miles, so. If you're not saving that much money, you might as well just accumulate more miles and work towards the next level of status. Like what I did is I accumulated miles on Aegean to some point, and then I switched over to another airline. Like once I had the status for the next 2 years, which you can do there, I just switched over. And so then it's like, all right, I have this status and I'm working toward this status because it just wasn't really working as well. So I don't really, do anything. I don't go to my way to collect miles because they're very hard to use. I think in the U.S. maybe they're a little bit easier. Turkish perhaps is a little bit easier to use. But like Emirates, Qatar, just the worst redemption ever. You fly like halfway around the world and you got to do that 100 times to get anything decent. So I don't rely too much on miles. I get miles to earn status. The status potentially gets into a better quality lounge because most lounges aren't that great. One way to earn status if you're an American or you can get an American credit card is Barclays card has an American Airlines card where every dollar or most dollars qualify towards status points. And so you can basically, without ever flying on an American Airlines flight or flying on any kind of one world flights, because again, you earn miles on one, they go to the other, you can earn your way up towards, I believe, any level of status. So I think it's $125,000 a year. You get like the third level of status, which again, doesn't give you as many benefits. Like if you're flying an American metal, as they call it, if you're flying American flights, you might get like complimentary upgrades domestically. You're not going to get that if you're like me and you're not flying to the US, but you'll get the reciprocal benefits on the other one world airlines. And so again, that could be better lounges, it could be priority check-in. And so that's what I'm focused on. It's not getting stuff for free. The bottom line is I'm focused on saving time, being a little bit of a higher person. Believe me, I think hotels are even worse at this, but they make it out like, oh, you're going to like experience an indulgent amount of benefits. Nah, like you're going to be like a little bit higher in the list. Like don't imagine that anyone's going to be fawning over you, but you will have a little bit better service. You will be able to use special lines. For me, it's about saving time. That's more important than money. And so that's the way I would approach airline loyalty programs, is about how do I save time, not how do I get free stuff.